As you're probably more than aware, we recently looked at the new RTX 4070 Ti, formerly dubbed the RTX 4080, before it was cancelled. Now in our launch day coverage, I made it pretty clear that the performance is great. And of course you get the added benefits of the latest iteration of DLSS with frame generation, which further strengthens its performance in the market, with my only real gripe coming down to the price. Now in typical fashion, we have a couple of AIB cards, and today we're taking a look at the ASUS TUF Gaming OC, which will set you back even more. So what can it offer in return for that extra cash? Well, that's what we're going to find out. But before we do, here's a quick word from this video's sponsor. Hello mate, you alright? Yeah, just got all the bits for my banging new gaming PC. Just got to put it together. It's going to be so much better than yours. Oh, right. What did you get then? The latest Intel 12th gen processor, a feature-packed motherboard, and 32 gig of DDR4 memory. See? Miles ahead of yours. You realise that board needs DDR5 memory, don't you? Don't tell me you went and bought the wrong stuff. DDR4 is so 2014. I can't believe you was that stupid. What? No, you're joking. What should I get then? For me, I'd be looking at Corsair's newest Vengeance DDR5 kits, or if you're wanting that all-important RGB, then go for the Dominator Platinum RGB. Oh, you are a lifesaver, thanks, but where can I find out more? By clicking the link in the description below, of course. And you call me the stupid one. So it's been a while since ASUS have sent us a GPU, but I'm glad that they kind of have, because it's given me a bit of an appreciation for how far a certain range has come. And the TUF series, based on this card, shows they've come a long way, because it's a pretty decent looking card overall and feels incredibly well built. Now, I won't lie and say that it's small, because the whole of the 40 series in general saw a huge uplift in size when compared to the 30 series. And even, I guess, what you would class as a mid-tier consumer card like a 4070 Ti, well, it's still on a much larger scale than what you'd expect, coming in at 305mm long, 138mm tall, and 65mm thick. So we'll take up about 3 and a bit slots inside your case. In terms of the weight, looks can be deceiving, as you'd expect it to come in quite heavy, but it's actually the opposite at exactly 1500 grams, which is about 240 grams less than the Gigabyte Gaming OC card that we have, and much lighter than, frankly, any 4080 card that we've had in our studio. Now, design-wise, the Shroud clearly means business and is a big step up from TUF gaming cards of old, with a single die-cast piece of aluminium that encompasses the 3 90mm axial tech fans, of which, by typical standards, follow the engineering mantra of having the outer 2 spin anti-clockwise, while the middle fan spins the other way to reduce turbulence and, of course, increase airflow. Styling-wise, it's all kept, well, quite subtle, with the whole shroud being gunmetal coloured with moulded TUF Gaming branding, along with some reflective logos on the centre of the fans. RGB is also kept pretty minimal, with a small strip and TUF Gaming logo on the top cycling through the spectrum, though can be controlled through software if you want to change it up or turn it off completely. Compared to the 4080 TUF Gaming, the whole card, including fans, are actually slightly smaller, which given the lower power delivery and performance of the 4070 Ti was expected, and should still keep things at bay. Now, due to the metal exoskeleton design of the shroud, which screws through to the rear of the card, it also adds a little bit of rigidity to the card. But for those wanting extra peace of mind, it does come included with a small magnetic prop-up mount, which also doubles up as having a screwdriver inside for help with building your PC. While it's not going to do the same as a proper mount that screws actually into your case, I have to admit, it's pretty simple but effective and a welcome addition. In terms of power, the card has a single 12VH PWR connector, which does seem a bit overkill for a 4070 Ti, but that's Nvidia spec, I guess. Though papers have confirmed to me that AIBs do actually have a choice on the 4070 Ti, and could have gone with 2 8-pin connectors instead. So, ASUS also bundle in a double 8-pin to 12+4 adapter, further confirming that a 12VH PWR connector really actually wasn't necessary. And after the bad press it's had, I don't think people really wanted it. In terms of the power, being a custom card, it does take the power limit from the stock 285 watts up to 314 watts if you're wanting to play around with sliders and overclock, but default does remain at 285 watts. Around the back of the card is a stylish but slightly thin backplate, and while it does have some heat pads to aid in cooling, they are also on the thin side, so I can't imagine them actually really doing much, though is better than nothing, I guess. There's also a vent at the end of the backplate to help heat escape in conjunction with the end fan, pushing airflow through it. And in terms of the I/O, ASUS have definitely, switched things up slightly, with a double-decker set of HDMI ports, along with 3 DisplayPort ports. Taking the card apart was pretty easy, with the majority of the screws being on the rear. There are a few on the I/O, and then once the main shroud and heatsink cooler are removed, more screws are revealed, which hold the backplate on. The heatsink is split into 2 large sections, with heat pipes passing through to each end to help dissipate the heat in the most efficient way. Nope, there's no vapor chamber here, which is quite weird because we've been seeing a lot of cards incorporating that recently. However, the cooler does make direct contact with the GPU core and the GDDR6X memory chips on one plate, while extra plates and heat pads are in place that make contact directly with the VRMs. The PCB is a bit larger than what we're used to on Nvidia cards, but is extremely well organised and includes 13 phases in total, which are split between the GPU and the memory. The 11 for the GPU are all made by Vishay and are SIC 639 power stages that are rated for 50 amps of continuous current each, along with the 2 phases for the memory utilising exactly the same components. The GPU phases are managed by the UP9512R controller, while the memory phases are managed by the UP9529Q controller, which is pretty typical of what we've actually seen before. I think they actually have the same on the 3050. So a pretty beefy cooler for a 4070 Ti, and underneath, everything is what you'd expect from a TUF card. While ASUS have the strict range of GPUs that sit above the TUF range, it's clear to see that ASUS have added a lot more to their TUF cards in terms of quality materials and just better designs of both the PCB and the cooler. So let's take a look at exactly how it compares to other cards when it comes to performance. Starting with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and it's off to a little bit of a rocky start as the Gigabyte Gaming OC manages to outperform the ASUS TUF card, but by a margin of 2.5%. So it could be deemed as margin of error and not enough to notice any difference in game, while the 1% lows remain very similar, around 40 FPS. In Cyberpunk, it's a very similar story, with the ASUS TUF falling 1 FPS behind the Gigabyte Gaming OC, with a slightly larger margin of 2 FPS in the 1% lows. Again, it could be argued margin of error, though even with retests we always found the same result, with the Gigabyte card slightly ahead. Death Stranding was exactly the same, with a 3% lead in favour of the Gigabyte Gaming OC card, though performance was exactly where we expected it to be for a 4070 Ti in general. Regardless of who wins or not, I don't think anyone would be disappointed with the performance levels seen here today. Lastly, in Watch Dogs Legion, things align exactly as they did in the other games, with the ASUS TUF falling behind the Gigabyte card by a couple of %. Though more interestingly, the 6950 XT from Sapphire now sits between both 4070 Ti cards, though with much lower 1% lows. So looking at a small selection of games, the ASUS TUF card did perform within the range that's expected, but with any custom card, it's all about the performance of the cooler and what it's able to do there. So we booted up F122 at 4K on max settings, and after a long loop run, we found the GPU temperature sitting around 63 degrees, with the occasional small jumps up to 65 degrees. The memory junction went a little higher at 68 degrees, while the GPU hotspot temperature sat closely around the 74 degree mark throughout the test. These temperatures meant that our fan speed remained fairly quiet at below 1400 RPM, with the power draw pulling around 273 watts during our run. So again, it performed within where we'd expect it to. But if TUF cards give us anything to go by based on previous experience, it should do extremely well in terms of overclocking. So with that in mind, we raised the temperature limit along with the power limit to 110%, which takes it from its stock 285 watts up to 314 watts, and then proceeded to raise both the core clock and memory clocks. After pushing the core clock by 225 MHz and the memory clock by 700 MHz, we settled on stopping there due to instability issues if we went any further. This resulted in a CPU clock of 2535 MHz, boost clock of 2955 MHz, and a memory clock of 1400 MHz, or a little under 22.4 gigabits per second effective. By pushing the card to these limits, we went back into F122 to run the same test. This time we saw the GPU temperature didn't really change a whole lot, sitting mostly around the 66 degrees range, and this small increase carries over to the other temperatures as well, with the memory junction not changing at all at 68 degrees, while the GPU hotspot temperature saw a very slight increase up to a maximum of 78 degrees, but sitting mostly around the 76 degree point. Now, even with these slight increases, the fan speed only saw a very slight bump that was about 60 RPM higher than the pre-overclock results, while the power also saw a small increase, now up to 286 watts. In games, this now sees the ASUS TUF Gaming OC coming in with just over 6% more performance than at stock, and now puts it above the stock performance of the 4070 Ti from Gigabyte, also now with stronger 1% lows too. In Cyberpunk, we still saw gains, but only of around 4%, though again, free performance is always nice to see. While it did see a boost, it's still only just ahead of the Gigabyte Gaming OC, and a bigger gap would have been nicer to see there. Stranding saw an uplift of 7% between stock and overclock performance, which now also puts it ahead of the Gaming OC from Gigabyte, which we will be looking at its overclock performance in future content, as I feel that there may be a bit of a fierce battle between both cards when overclocked. Lastly, in Watch Dogs Legion, we again saw a similar gain as other games with just under 6% of extra performance when overclocked, which again means that the ASUS TUF Gaming OC is now ahead of the other 4070 Ti we've tested in both the averages and the 1% lows. So some interesting points to take away, but let's talk about pricing first and foremost. Now it's always a tricky one, as the 4070 Ti launched for $799, which is an improvement on the $899 that it was meant to launch for. But that also equates to £799 in the UK. But as this is a custom AIB card, pre-overclocked, it does come in at £959, which while it did overclock like a beast, it makes it a somewhat bitter pill to swallow. I made it clear with the $799 price tag though, it was nice to see the 4070 Ti coming in with a $100 price cut compared to when it was meant to be an RTX 4080. It's still about $100 or kind of so more expensive than it needs to be. And that's pretty evident when you look back at the 20 series or even how things stack up against AMD, who also need a $100 haircut on the 7900 XT to make even that more palatable. While there is no Founders Edition 4070 Ti, there are reference cards, and even ASUS have cards that hit that mark. But the extra markup on the TUF Gaming OC just doesn't sit that well for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the design, the cooler, the overclocking headroom, and generally what's been done behind the scenes. But at its stock configuration, yeah, it loses out to a similar 4070 Ti from Gigabyte, which while at the time of filming I'm unaware on pricing, should actually be at least $50 cheaper than this, though I'm yet to test that in terms of overclocking, thermals and power. So I may end up eating my words when we release our content on that, but for the most part, I don't think I'm wrong. I also don't think ASUS are solely to blame for this, as with anything these days, profit margins are smaller than ever. And with other AIBs also coming in on various cards at these kind of more inflated, higher pricing, everyone is kind of in the same boat. Obviously, if Nvidia reduced their reference spec to $699, then this card would be sitting at around $850, which, while it's better, is still not great. Now, we conducted a poll just a few days ago, and while it was kind of obvious that the majority were going to choose the cheapest option, it still shows that the $799 price tag is out of reach for most consumers, and higher than that for any AIB card is, well, very much the same. The other issue here is that if the 4070 Ti is priced in kind of this way, what will it mean for more entry-level cards like, I don't know, RTX 4060 or 4060 Ti? Will we, I don't know, be expected to pay $700 or $600? It really is terrible. Couple that with the fact that this card only does have 12GB of VRAM, which makes it tricky when AMD's 7000 series, which is priced similar, at least to this card, comes with much, much more. Now, if you are looking at buying a card like this, I think there are better choices, like the 7900 XTX, which while it is still out of reach for most consumers, it really is the best value for the performance that you get, especially if you can get one for that MSRP price and not pay extra for a fancy custom AIB overclock card. So yeah, back to the ASUS TUF card. It really did show some strong performance when it came to the cooling while remaining on the quiet side throughout. So I guess if money is no object, while I can't force your hand, you won't be disappointed having it in your system, because it will get the job done well and will be silent at doing it, though you might not have any money left to actually, buy any new games to play on it. Tricky decision to make, right? Either way, the 4070 Ti was a card that was meant to be something else. So if it can change once and be discounted by $100, maybe Nvidia can take a further hit and do the same again. Double or nothing? Because I fear if they don't, yeah, they might not sell many. And that makes it even harder for AIBs like ASUS to make money as well. So yeah, what do you think? Can you think of something else you'd rather spend close to $1,000 or £1,000 on? I know I can, so let me know in the comments section below. For now, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then consider supporting us over on Patreon, where you'll get a ton of great features, including a live Q&A session that's starting this month, behind the scenes content, and much, much more. The link for all that cool stuff is down below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.